The scorching summer sun beat down on Redemption Creek like God's own judgment, as Olivia Thorne stumbled through the dusty street, one hand clutching her swollen belly, the other desperately gripping a letter that had shattered her world. Arizona Territory, 1883, was no place for a woman alone, especially one with child and no husband in sight. Blood had soaked through her simple cotton dress where it stretched across her midsection, the crimson stain spreading with each labored step she took. Folks scattered out of her way, mothers pulling children close, men averting their eyes. In a town built on second chances, some sins were beyond forgiveness. "Please," Olivia gasped, reaching for the arm of Mrs. Whittaker as the shopkeeper's wife hurried past. "The baby, something's wrong, Mrs." Whittaker yanked her arm away as if Olivia's touch might contaminate her. "You made your bed, girl. Dr. Simmons won't waste his time on the likes of you or that." Her eyes flicked to Olivia's belly with undisguised disgust. Bastard. Redemption Creek had once been Olivia's home, but now it felt like foreign territory. 6 months ago, she'd fled in the night with promises of love on her lips and dreams of California in her heart. Now she was back, abandoned, dying, and carrying a child no one believed deserved to live. Her vision swam as she stumbled toward the doctor's office at the end of the street. Each step was agony, each breath a battle. The morning's bleeding had started slowly but was now a torrent she couldn't stop. "Miss, you need help there." The voice came from behind her, deep and steady as the mountains to the west. Olivia turned, nearly collapsing as she did. A man she didn't recognize stood before her, tall and lean, with eyes the color of stormy skies and a face weathered by sun and wind. A stranger in a town where strangers weren't welcome. "Doctor," she managed to say, pointing weakly toward the whitewashed building ahead. "My baby." He moved with the fluid grace of a mountain lion, catching her as her knees finally gave way. "I've got you, madam." "It doesn't matter," she whispered, feeling darkness creeping in at the edges of her vision. "They said my baby ain't worth saving." His arms tightened around her as he lifted her fully off the ground. Through the haze of pain, she saw his jaw clench, something dangerous flickering behind those storm cloud eyes. "Then I'll save you both," the cowboy said, his voice a solemn vow as he carried her toward the doctor's office. Olivia's world went black before they reached the steps. When consciousness returned, it came in fragments. The cool press of a damp cloth against her forehead, the low murmur of male voices tense with argument, the lingering scent of whiskey and antiseptic. "I don't treat whores," a voice hissed Dr. Simmons, she realized through the fog of pain. "Especially not ones carrying a half-breed child. You'll treat her, or I'll put a bullet in you and find someone who will." The cowboy's voice was calm, terrifyingly so. Olivia forced her eyes open. The room swam into focus, the doctor's examination room with its glass cabinets and clean white sheets. Dr. Simmons stood with his back against the wall, face pale beneath his neatly trimmed beard. The cowboy was by the door, one hand resting casually on the revolver at his hip. "The baby," Olivia whispered. Both men turned to her. The cowboy moved first, crossing to her side in 3 long strides. "Still hanging on, madam, but we need to stop that bleeding." "Who are you?" she asked. "Name's Ryder Quinn." He took her hand, his calloused palm warm against her cold fingers. "You're going to be fine, both of you." "You can't know that," Dr. Simmons interjected, though he'd begun rolling up his sleeves. "And if word gets out I treated her." "Then folks will know you remember your oath," Ryder replied, not looking away from Olivia. "Now get to work, doctor." What followed was a haze of pain and whispered instructions. Olivia clutched Ryder's hand until her knuckles went white, focusing on his steady presence as Dr. Simmons worked to stop the bleeding that threatened both her life and that of her unborn child. "Placentas started to detach," the doctor muttered. "She needs complete bed rest." No movement, no excitement. He glanced up, meeting Olivia's gaze with reluctant professionalism. "You understand me, Miss Thorne. One wrong move and you lose the baby." "I understand," she whispered. "She can stay at my place," Ryder said, the declaration startling both Olivia and the doctor. "That's hardly proper," Simmons began, "and leaving her to die in the street is." Ryder's voice carried a dangerous edge. "I've got a cabin outside town, clean, quiet, she'll be safe there." I don't even know you, Olivia said weakly. The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been a smile. No, madam, you don't, but I know what it's like to be alone when the world's turned its back on you. He nodded toward her belly, and that little one deserves a fighting chance. Later, as twilight painted the Arizona sky in shades of amber and gold, Olivia found herself carefully settled in the back of a wagon, cushioned by blankets and shielded from curious eyes. Ryder Quinn drove with quiet confidence, guiding the horses away from town and toward the low hills to the west. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, voice barely audible over the creak of wagon wheels. He was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. "Some debts can't be paid back, only paid forward," he finally said. His cabin appeared as the last light faded from the sky, a sturdy structure of timber and stone nestled among juniper trees. Smoke curled from the chimney, and lamplight glowed in the windows. "You have family?" she asked as he carefully lifted her from the wagon. "Just me and the horses," he replied. "And now you and the little one for a spell." The cabin's interior was surprisingly neat and comfortable. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, its warmth filling the single large room. A curtain partitioned off a corner that Olivia suspected was his sleeping area. A solid table with 2 chairs stood in the center, and shelves lined with books covered another wall. "You read," she said, surprised. "Long nights get longer without something to fill them." He set her down on a bed he'd clearly prepared, with fresh linens and extra pillows. "Rest now. We'll talk more tomorrow." Morning brought clarity and with it shame. Olivia awoke to find herself in a stranger's home, dependent on charity she hadn't earned and didn't deserve. The events of yesterday returned in a rush: the bleeding, the townspeople's rejection, the cowboy's unexpected intervention. Ryder entered from outside, carrying a bucket of fresh water. He paused when he saw she was awake, setting the bucket down carefully. "Morning," he said. "How are you feeling?" "Better." She pushed herself up slightly, mindful of the doctor's warnings. "Mr. Quinn, Ryder, I'm grateful for your help, but I can't impose like this. Once I'm strong enough to travel, doctor said 6 weeks bed rest minimum." He pulled a chair near the bed and sat, his movements deliberate and unhurried. "Where would you go, Miss Thorne?" "Olivia," she corrected automatically. "And I don't know, somewhere, anywhere. With a newborn, alone." He shook his head. "Stay until the baby comes, get your strength back. Then decide." She studied him carefully in the morning light. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30. His dark hair was cut short, though a stubbled beard shadowed his jaw. His clothes were trail-worn but clean, simple cotton shirt, denim pants, leather vest. Nothing about him suggested wealth or excess, yet he offered shelter without hesitation. "Why did you come to Redemption Creek?" she asked. Something flickered in his eyes, caution, perhaps. "Passing through, heard there might be work breaking horses at the Turner spread. And now I've got a guest who needs tending." He stood. "Hungry? I'm no fancy cook, but I can manage eggs and bacon." The days settled into an unexpected rhythm. Ryder would rise before dawn, tend to his horses and the small garden behind the cabin, then prepare breakfast. They'd eat together, an awkward silence gradually giving way to careful conversation. He'd ride out for a few hours hunting, he said, or checking traps, then return by midday. Afternoons he spent reading aloud to her, everything from dime novels to Shakespeare, his deep voice bringing the words to life while she mended his shirts or worked on tiny garments for the baby. In the evenings, he taught her to play chess on a carved wooden set he kept wrapped in velvet. "Where did you learn to play?" she asked on the 4th night, watching him reset the pieces after another defeat. "Prison," he said simply, not looking up. 7 years in Yuma. The admission hung in the air between them, Olivia's hands stilled on the blanket she'd been straightening. "For what?" she finally asked. "Murder." His eyes met hers, unflinching. Man deserved killing, jury disagreed. She should have been frightened. Instead, she felt only curiosity. "You're not what I expected a murderer to be like." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "And you're not what I expected a fallen woman to be like." The term stung, though she'd heard worse in town. "Is that what they told you I was?" "Folks in town have plenty to say about Olivia Thorne," he acknowledged. "Not much of it kind. And you believe them." He considered this, head tilted slightly. I believe people rarely know the whole truth about each other. The father was a Navajo scout, she said suddenly, one hand moving protectively over her belly. James, we were going to California together. He was killed by raiders on the way. The words spilled out as if a dam had broken inside her. I came back because I had nowhere else to go. Ryder nodded, absorbing this without judgment. I'm sorry about James. Dr. Simmons called my baby a half-breed. Her voice hardened, like that makes it less worthy of living. Some men fear what's different. Ryder's hand closed around a chess piece the Black Knight. Makes them cruel. What were you in prison for? She asked again, sensing there was more to the story. He was quiet for a long moment, rolling the chess piece between his fingers. Killed a man who was beating a Pima woman and her child. He was a prominent rancher. I was a drifter with Apache friends. His shoulders lifted in a slight shrug. Wasn't much of a trial. Understanding bloomed between them, a fragile thing built on shared knowledge of injustice. That night, when Ryder moved to take his customary place on the bedroll near the fire, Olivia stopped him. Stay, she said softly, patting the edge of the bed. Just stay closer, please. He hesitated, then nodded, stretching out atop the covers beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth but not so close as to be improper. They fell asleep like that, not touching but connected all the same. The bleeding returned 2 days later. Olivia woke in the night to cramping pain and the warm wetness of blood soaking through her nightgown. Her cry brought Ryder instantly to her side. The baby, she gasped, clutching at his arm. Ryder, the baby, hold on, he said, his voice steady even as his eyes betrayed his fear. Just hold on, Olivia. He wrapped her in blankets, lifted her as if she weighed nothing, and carried her to where his horse waited outside. The ride to town was a nightmare of jolting pain and whispered prayers. Ryder held her before him in the saddle, one arm secure around her waist while the other controlled the horse. Don't let me lose this baby, she pleaded against his chest. It's all I have left of him. You won't lose it, he promised, and you have more than you know. Dr. Simmons was roused from sleep, bleary-eyed and irritable until he saw the blood soaking through Olivia's blankets. This time, there was no argument, no moralizing. He worked quickly and efficiently while Ryder paced outside the examination room, hat clutched in white-knuckled hands. When the door finally opened, Simmons looked exhausted but satisfied. She's stable, baby's still fighting. He wiped his hands on a cloth. But she can't be moved again, not for any reason. She stays here until delivery. In your surgery, Ryder frowned. There's a room upstairs. My wife uses it for her quilting circle. Simmons sighed heavily. She won't like it, but she's a Christian woman. She'll manage. The next 3 weeks passed with excruciating slowness. Mrs. Simmons was coldly civil, bringing meals and clean linens but never speaking directly to Olivia. The doctor checked on her twice daily, his professional demeanor warming slightly as the pregnancy stabilized. Ryder came every day, bringing fresh flowers or a new book to read aloud. He sat beside her bed for hours, telling stories of his travels or simply keeping silent company. The townsfolk whispered, of course about the fallen woman and the ex-convict who championed her cause, but the whispers didn't reach the upstairs room where Olivia waited and hoped. I've been thinking, Ryder said one afternoon as rain pattered against the window, about California. Olivia looked up from the baby blanket she was crocheting. What about it? It's good country, plenty of work for a man who knows horses. He cleared his throat. I've got some money saved, enough to get there, maybe buy a small place. Hope fluttered in her chest, fragile as a butterfly's wing. Are you leaving? I thought maybe we could go, after. His eyes met hers, earnest and uncertain. You, me, and the little one, the crochet hook stilled in her hands. Ryder. Not asking for anything improper, he added quickly. We could marry first if you'd be willing. Give the child a name. A name, she repeated, tears welling in her eyes. You do that, for a child that isn't yours. He reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. That baby is innocent, Olivia, and you. He paused, seeming to search for words. You deserve better than what this town's giving you. And what about what you deserve? She asked softly. I've got debts that need paying, he said simply. This feels right. The baby came 2 weeks early. on a night when lightning split the Arizona sky and thunder shook the foundations of Dr. Simmons' house. Olivia's labor started just after midnight, sharp pains that woke her from uneasy sleep. By dawn, the pain had built to an unbearable crescendo. Mrs. Simmons, whatever her personal feelings, proved herself a competent midwife, while the doctor himself attended with surprising gentleness. Ryder waited downstairs, deaf to suggestions that he leave, that this was women's business. "Push now, Mrs. Simmons commanded as the sun broke over the eastern mountains. "Push hard, girl." Olivia bore down with the last of her strength, a scream tearing from her throat as the baby finally slipped free of her body. There was a moment of terrible silence, and then the angry, miraculous wail of new life. "A boy," Dr. Simmons announced, something like wonder in his voice. "Strong lungs on him." Mrs. Simmons cleaned the infant while the doctor attended to Olivia. When they placed the swaddled baby in her arms, Olivia felt the world shift and realign around this new center. He was beautiful, perfect in every way. His skin was a shade darker than hers, his hair a shock of black. When his tiny eyelids fluttered open, she saw James in the shape of his eyes, the strong line of his nose. "Can he come up?" she asked, not taking her eyes from her son. The doctor hesitated, then nodded. Moments later, Ryder appeared in the doorway, hat in hand, his expression a mixture of awe and uncertainty. "Come meet him," Olivia said softly. Ryder approached the bed cautiously, as if afraid he might somehow break the tableau of mother and child. He peered down at the baby's face, something profound and unreadable passing across his features. "He's perfect," Ryder whispered. "I want to name him James," Olivia said. "James Ryder Thorne." She looked up, meeting Ryder's startled gaze. "If that's all right with you." His hand, when it brushed against the baby's cheek, trembled slightly. "I'd be honored." They were married 2 weeks later by the traveling circuit preacher, a man either unaware of or unconcerned by Redemption Creek's gossip. The ceremony was simple, just the two of them, baby James, and the preacher's wife as witness. Olivia wore a dress Mrs. Simmons had grudgingly given her, altered to fit her still recovering body. Ryder wore the only good shirt he owned, freshly washed and pressed. They spoke their vows beneath an ancient cottonwood tree outside of town, the baby sleeping peacefully in a basket nearby. "I ain't rich," Ryder said that night as they sat beside the fire in his cabin, "and I've got a past that follows me." "We all have pasts," Olivia replied, glancing to where little James slept in a cradle Ryder had crafted by hand. "It's the future that matters now." They left for California the following week, traveling in a wagon Ryder had purchased with his savings. Their possessions were few clothes, Ryder's books, the chess set, and supplies for the journey. But as Redemption Creek faded into the distance behind them, Olivia felt lighter than she had in months. The journey west was not easy. Summer heat baked the trail, dust coating their skin and clothes. Water was scarce, and the rough terrain made for slow going. They traveled at dawn and dusk, resting during the hottest part of the day beneath whatever shade they could find. James proved a resilient traveler, rarely crying except when hungry or wet. Ryder doted on the boy, carving tiny wooden animals to entertain him and singing old trail songs in a surprisingly melodic baritone. "He has your smile," Ryder said one evening as they watched James sleeping. "He has his father's eyes," Olivia replied automatically, then flushed. I know what you mean." Ryder's hand found hers in the gathering darkness. "It's good he'll know where he came from." They had been married nearly a month before Ryder kissed her for the first time, a gentle, questioning press of lips beneath a sky scattered with stars. Olivia responded with a hunger that surprised them both, her hands coming up to frame his face, drawing him closer. "I don't want you to think you have to," he murmured against her mouth. "The marriage, it can be just for the boy if that's what you want." Olivia pulled back just enough to meet his gaze. "Is that what you want, Ryder?" His hands settled at her waist, tentative but warm. "No," he admitted. "It's not." That night, they made love for the first time, their movements careful and tender beside the dying campfire. Afterward, as Ryder held her close beneath the blankets, Olivia felt something long broken inside her begin to heal. "I think I'm falling in love with you," she whispered into the darkness. his arms tightened around her. "I think I fell the moment I saw you in that dusty street." They reached the California border as autumn painted the landscape in golds and crimsons. The Sierra Nevada loomed ahead, a final challenge before the valleys beyond. They joined a small wagon train for the mountain crossing, grateful for the additional security and shared knowledge of the trails. It was among these fellow travelers that they first truly became a family in the eyes of others, not the ex-convict and the fallen woman, but the Quinns with their beautiful dark-eyed baby boy. "You're good with him," observed Alina Wilson, a grandmother traveling to join her son in Sacramento. "Some men can't abide another man's child, but you're different." Ryder looked up from where he was bouncing James on his knee, the baby's laughter ringing out across the campsite. "He's mine in all the ways that matter," he said simply. The mountain crossing proved treacherous, early snow making the trails slippery and dangerous. They lost a wagon to a ravine, though thankfully no lives. Olivia held her breath, each time their own wheels slid on icy ground, clutching James to her chest while Ryder coaxed the horses forward with steady hands and calming words. When they finally descended into the Sacramento Valley, the relief was palpable. The land spread before them rich with promise, fertile soil, abundant water, and possibilities as vast as the western sky. They parted ways with the wagon train in Placerville, continuing on to a small settlement called Willow Creek, where Ryder had heard of a horse ranch in need of experienced hands. The owner, Samuel Hartford, was initially skeptical of the taciturn cowboy with the mixed-race baby and young wife, but Ryder's way with horses quickly won him over. "Never seen a man gentle a Mustang that fast," Hartford remarked after watching Ryder work with a particularly spirited mare. "Where'd you learn that?" "Apache taught me some," Ryder replied, stroking the mare's neck as she nuzzled against his shoulder. "Learned the rest in prison." To his credit, Hartford merely nodded. "Past is past, it's what a man does now that counts." They settled into a small cabin on Hartford's property, grateful for the solid roof and steady work. Olivia planted a garden and took in mending to earn extra money. James grew stronger each day, his personality emerging in bright smiles and determined efforts to crawl. Life wasn't easy, but it was good, better than either of them had dared to hope for in those dark days in Redemption Creek. They worked hard, saved what they could, and began to plan for a place of their own someday. Winter in California proved milder than the Arizona territories, though rain fell in seemingly endless sheets, turning the roads to mud and confining them often to the cabin. These were some of Olivia's favorite days, the three of them together in the warm, dry space, Ryder teaching her to play guitar while James practiced pulling himself up on furniture. "I want him to know about his father," Olivia said one such afternoon as they watched James sleeping. "His real father, I mean," Ryder nodded, understanding in his eyes. "We'll tell him when he's old enough, about James, about the Navajo, about how brave his mother was, coming back to a town that turned its back on her. And we'll tell him how a stranger saved us both," she added, leaning into his side. Spring brought new opportunities. Hartford, impressed with Ryder's work and integrity, offered him a partnership in a new venture breeding and training horses for the growing market in San Francisco. The arrangement would require initial investment but promised greater returns than simple wages. "I've got some saved," Ryder said as they discussed it that night. "Not enough, though." Olivia reached beneath their bed, pulling out a small wooden box. Inside was a leather pouch containing a gold and turquoise necklace, her last gift from James. "This should cover the difference," she said, placing it in Ryder's hand. He stared at the necklace, then at her. "Olivia, no, this is your memory of him." "I have James and our son," she replied gently. "This is just a thing. Our future is worth more." The partnership proved successful beyond their expectations. Hartford had connections in San Francisco society, and Ryder had an almost supernatural talent with difficult horses. Within a year, they had earned enough to purchase a small property of their own 10 acres with a sturdy house, good pasture, and a stream running along the western boundary. They moved in on James's first birthday, celebrating both milestones with a small gathering of the friends they'd made. The boy, now walking with determination if not always grace, charmed everyone with his bright smile and curious nature. That night, after the guests had gone and James was asleep in his new room, Ryder and Olivia stood on the porch of their home, his arm around her shoulders as they gazed at the stars. "Did you ever think we'd get here?" she asked. "That day in Redemption Creek." He was quiet for a moment, considering. "I hoped," he finally said. "When I saw you in that street, something told me to stay, that my life was about to change." "Mine too," she murmured, "though I was too scared to see it then." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I've been wanting to ask you something. It doesn't change anything if you say no." Olivia tilted her head, curious. "What is it?" "I want to adopt James, legally." His eyes searched hers, uncertain. "Make him my son in the eyes of the law, not just in my heart." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, spilling over before she could stop them. "You already are his father in all the ways that matter. Is that a yes?" She rose on tiptoe, pressing her lips to his. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The legal process took time and patience. The local judge was initially reluctant. Adoption was uncommon enough, but for a white man to adopt a half-Navajo child raised questions. Ryder's prison record created additional complications. Hartford intervened, using his influence to smooth the way. Letters attesting to Ryder's character arrived from unexpected sources: Dr. Simmons in Redemption Creek, the warden at Yuma Prison, even Mrs. Wilson from the wagon train. When the papers were finally signed 6 months later, they celebrated with a trip to San Francisco. The city was a wonder to Olivia, who had never seen anything like its bustling streets and grand buildings. James, now approaching 2, was wide-eyed at the ships in the harbor and the clanging cable cars. They stayed at a respectable hotel, dined in restaurants where no one knew or cared about their past, and visited a photographer to have a family portrait taken there first. In the finished image, Ryder stood tall and proud in a new suit, one hand resting on Olivia's shoulder as she sat with James on her lap, all three smiling at the camera. "Quinn family, 1886, read the inscription on the back in Ryder's careful handwriting. Life settled into a rhythm of seasons and milestones. Their horse breeding business grew steadily, developing a reputation for quality that brought buyers from as far away as Oregon and Nevada. They added to their property, building a larger stable and hiring 2 young men to help with the training. James grew into a curious, kind-hearted boy with his mother's quick mind and a natural affinity for horses that made Ryder burst with pride. If the other children at the small local school sometimes commented on his darker skin or straight black hair, he seemed untroubled by it. "Teacher says I look like the pictures in her book about Indians," he announced one evening at supper, around his 5th birthday. Olivia and Ryder exchanged glances across the table. "You remember what we told you about your first father?" Olivia asked gently. James nodded, serious. "He was a Navajo scout who died being brave, but then Pa found us and saved us both." "That's right," Ryder confirmed. "And being Navajo is something to be proud of. It's part of who you are." "Like being a Quinn?" James asked. "Exactly like that," Ryder agreed, ruffling the boy's hair. When James was 7, a letter arrived from Redemption Creek. Dr. Simmons wrote that a Navajo man had come to town asking after Olivia and a baby James's uncle, searching on behalf of his father's family. "They should know him," Olivia said that night as they discussed the letter. "And he should know them," Ryder agreed, though concern lined his face. "What if they want to take him back to the reservation?" "He's our son," Olivia said firmly, "but he deserves to know his heritage." They wrote to Dr. Simmons, providing their address and an invitation for James's Navajo family to contact them directly. Months passed with no response, and they had nearly forgotten about it when a letter arrived bearing unfamiliar handwriting. The writer was Thomas Begay, brother to James's father. He explained that their family had only recently learned of James's existence and wished to know him, if Olivia was agreeable. They had no intention of disrupting the boy's life, only of offering him connection to his father's people. The correspondence continued for nearly a year before Thomas and his wife made the journey to California. Their meeting was initially awkward, cultures and expectations colliding in the Quinn family's front parlor, but James's natural curiosity and Thomas's gentle patience soon bridged the gap. "He has his father's spirit," Thomas observed as they watched James demonstrating his riding skills. "Brave but thoughtful." The visit lasted 2 weeks, during which James absorbed stories of his Navajo heritage like parched earth taking in rain. When Thomas and his wife departed, it was with promises of future visits and an open invitation for James to spend time with them when he was older. "Thank you," Olivia said to Ryder that night as they lay in bed, the house quiet around them. "For what?" "For making this possible. For being the kind of man who would save a stranger and her unborn child. For loving our son enough to give him all of his heritage, not just the parts that are easy." He gathered her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I should be thanking you. For giving me a family when I thought I'd never have one." The years passed, marked by the changing seasons and the milestones of their growing son. Their business prospered, allowing them to expand their property and add comforts to their home. Olivia started a small school on their land, teaching the children of neighboring ranches alongside James. When James was 12, they traveled to Arizona to visit his Navajo relatives. It was Olivia's first time back in the territory since they'd left nearly a decade earlier. The landscape was both familiar and strange, invoking memories both painful and precious. They stopped briefly in Redemption Creek, finding it changed larger, more prosperous, with a railroad spur now connecting it to Tucson. Dr. Simmons had retired, though he received them warmly in his new home on the edge of town. "Never thought you'd make it," he admitted to Olivia as they sat on his porch, watching James and Ryder examine the doctor's new automobile. "That day when you came stumbling into town, bleeding and alone, I was sure we'd be burying both of you." "You would have," Olivia said quietly, "if not for Ryder." The old doctor nodded, his eyes finding the tall cowboy who stood with a protective hand on James's shoulder. "Some men are put in our path for a reason, Mrs. Quinn. Your husband is one of those men." From Redemption Creek, they traveled to the Navajo reservation where James's extended family welcomed them with a ceremony that moved Olivia to tears. Watching her son participate in rituals that connected him to his father's people. Seeing the pride in Ryder's eyes, as James was honored by the tribe, these were gifts she had never dared hope for in those dark days of her pregnancy. They returned to California with new appreciation for their life there and the journey that had brought them together. James, now bearing both his American and Navajo names with equal pride, seemed to stand taller, more confident in his place in the world. As they approached their 15th wedding anniversary, Ryder surprised Olivia with plans for a proper honeymoon, a trip to San Francisco to see the opera and stay at the Grand Palace Hotel. "We never had one," he pointed out when she protested the extravagance. "And James is old enough to help Hartford manage things for a week." The city had changed since their last visit, rebuilt and expanded after the earthquake of 1906, but its energy and beauty remained. They walked along the waterfront hand in hand, dined in elegant restaurants, and attended a performance of La Boheme that left Olivia breathless with its beauty. On their last night, dressed in their finest clothes for dinner at the hotel's renowned restaurant, Ryder presented her with a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, not a simple band like the one he'd placed on her finger 15 years earlier in Redemption Creek, but an elegant setting of gold filigree surrounding a perfect sapphire. "I promised you better one day," he said, as he slid it onto her finger beside her worn gold band. "Took longer than I planned. It's beautiful," she whispered, blinking back tears. "But I never needed better, Ryder. What you gave me, what you've always given me, was enough." He took her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "You saved me too, you know. I was just drifting, carrying my guilt like a stone. You and James gave me purpose again, a reason to build something good." When they returned home, they found James had managed admirably in their absence. At 16, he was nearly as tall as Ryder, with his mother's expressive eyes and his Navajo father's strong features. He developed Ryder's way with horses and Olivia's love of books, along with a talent for drawing that was entirely his own. "I've been thinking," he announced over dinner their first night back, "about my future." Olivia and Ryder exchanged glances. "What about it?" Ryder asked. "I want to go to college," James said, straightening his shoulders as if preparing for an argument. "There's a school in Berkeley with an agricultural program. I could learn things to help expand the business." Pride swelled in Olivia's chest. "Of course you should go." "We'll find a way," Ryder agreed, though college costs would strain their resources. "Your education is important." James broke into a grin. "I already applied, and I got in, with a scholarship for part of the fees." The celebration that followed was joyous, a night of planning and dreaming that stretched long into the evening. Later, as Olivia and Ryder prepared for bed, she found herself overwhelmed by the journey that had brought them to this moment. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked, gesturing to encompass their home, their life, the son preparing for college. "When you found me that day." Ryder considered the question, his expression thoughtful. "Not the specifics," he admitted, "but I knew you were worth saving, you and that baby." "Why?" she pressed. "Why help a stranger when everyone else turned away?" He sat beside her on the edge of their bed, taking her hands in his. "Because I know what it's like to be judged for things beyond your control, because that baby deserved a chance." He paused, a smile softening his features. "And because I looked at you and somehow knew you were my future." James left for Berkeley in the fall of 1899, their house suddenly quieter without his presence. The empty space he left was both physical and emotional, a bedroom with books still on shelves, a place at the table where no one sat, the absence of his laughter in the evenings. "We'll adjust," Ryder assured Olivia as they stood in the doorway of their son's room, her head resting against his shoulder. "And he'll be home for Christmas." They filled the hours with work expanding their business, taking on more students for Olivia's school, becoming more involved in the growing community around them. Ryder was elected to the town council, where his straightforward manner and fairness earned respect even from those who might have judged his past harshly. James thrived at university, his letters home filled with excitement about new ideas and opportunities. He made friends, joined the riding club, and even courted a young woman named Elizabeth who was studying to be a teacher. "You'll like her," he wrote. "She's smart and kind, and she wants to work with Indian children on reservations after graduation." When James brought Elizabeth home that Christmas, Olivia recognized in the young woman's determined spirit something of herself at that age, the desire to make a difference, to push against the boundaries society imposed. "Your son tells me you started your own school," Elizabeth said as they prepared Christmas dinner together. "Just a small one," Olivia demurred, "for the local children who couldn't easily get to town. He says you teach everyone, girls, boys, Mexican children, Indian children. That you don't turn anyone away." Olivia paused in her work, remembering a dusty street and cold eyes turning away from her pain. "Everyone deserves a chance," she said simply. The new century brought changes both great and small. Automobiles began to appear on the roads around their property. Electric lights came to their area, though Olivia maintained that nothing could replace the warm glow of oil lamps in the evening. James graduated with honors and returned home, bringing new techniques for breeding and training that expanded their business further. He and Elizabeth married in the spring of 1903, in a ceremony that blended Christian traditions with Navajo blessings offered by Thomas Begay, who traveled from Arizona with his family for the occasion. They built a small house on the Quinn property, close enough for family meals but far enough for privacy. When their first child was born a year later, a daughter with Elizabeth's auburn hair and James's dark eyes, they named her Olivia Ryder Quinn, honoring both the grandparents who had given James life and the one who had saved it. "She's perfect," Ryder whispered as he held his granddaughter for the first time, wonder in his voice. "Worth saving," Olivia agreed, resting her head against his shoulder as they gazed down at the sleeping infant, and she was. They all were. The frightened young woman bleeding in a dusty street. The unborn child no one thought deserved to live. The ex-convict seeking redemption through an act of kindness. All worthy. All saved by love that began with a simple, powerful promise made by a stranger. Then I'll save you both. As twilight settled over their California home, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Olivia Quinn stood on the porch beside the man who had kept that promise. Behind them, the sounds of family filled the house. James's deep laugh, Elizabeth's gentle voice, baby Olivia's contented coos. "No regrets?" Ryder asked, his arm warm around her waist. Olivia smiled up at him, seeing in his weathered face the same courage and kindness that had given her hope on the worst day of her life. "Not a single one," she replied, and knew it for the absolute truth.